6 candidates have been approved to run in Iran's presidential election later on this month. Now, the election is scheduled for June 28th. The candidates include the country's current Speaker of Parliament, a former interior minister, a former chief nuclear negotiator, and the current mayor of Tehran. This election, of course, comes after President Ebrahim Raisi died in a helicopter crash just last month. So for more on this, we want to bring in Eric Loeb. He's a non-resident scholar with the Middle East Institute's Iran program. Thanks for joining us. So here's the thing about these 6 candidates is they had to be pre-approved. Not anyone can run. So I imagine there's not a lot philosophically different between them. I mean, is it just kind of like trading one type of I guess the same person for another person, or are there differences?
Well, as you said, overall, between the 6, there are different shades of conservatism and hardliner. And so they do come from the same camp with slight differences between them. The one exception out of the 6 is a man by the name of Masoud Pezeshki, who is a member of parliament from northwestern Tehran of Tabriz. And he is a moderate and reformist, and he could mix things up in this election depending on the voter turnout.
Why did the Guardian Council, which I guess is the council that approves who can run, why did they allow him to be one of the 6?
Well, analysts and observers speculate that they allowed him into the race to try to increase voter turnout and increase the legitimacy of the regime, that this would attract moderate and reformist voters. And the regime has suffered historically low voter turnout in the last 2 elections, the 2021 presidential election and then the 2024 parliamentary election. So this may encourage voters to come out and vote for this reformist or moderate candidate, even if there's electoral manipulation or rigging behind the scenes.
So speaking of that, what role does the supreme leader play in this election? Just how much influence does he hold?
Well, he has a great deal of influence in setting the parameters of the election. His 12-member Guardian Council either approves or disqualifies candidates, and they actually disqualified about 70 or so candidates after or while approving the 6 that we see in front of us today. So he does have a great deal in setting the parameters of this election. But at the end of the day, he is going to have a lot of control, but he may not fully be able to control the outcome, which could make things somewhat interesting, although, of course, there's a lot of skepticism, again, that this is a predetermined outcome.
And you mentioned that quite a number of potential candidates were disqualified, including the former president. Why was that?
Well, former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was president from 2005 to 2013, was disqualified, even though he is part of the conservative and hardline camp. He had quite a deal of friction, particularly in his second term with the supreme leader. And right now, during such a sensitive time with such domestic and regional international pressure against Iran, not to mention the succession issue of the supreme leader looming large, the supreme leader is trying to find candidates that he can work with and manage during this critical time.
And you know, when news of President Raisi's death emerged, one of the questions that many people were asking was whether or not this was going to change anything in the region in terms of the relationships in the region, in terms of Houthi activity. And the answer generally was probably not. So, you know, this is all coming amid the war between Israel and Hamas. Could the elections have an impact on the war?
I think in general, it's not going to have an impact on Iran's foreign policy posture, presuming again that one of those 5 conservative or hardline candidates wins the presidential election. That said, and so Iran will likely again take a largely confrontational or belligerent stance towards its traditional adversaries of the U.S. and Israel. That said, there have been, even under Raisi, some talks going on between the United States and Iran in the regional country of Oman to try to dial down tensions between the U.S. and Iran during this war.
Eric Loeb, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.